I'm here to testify against you. Delia Crane said it at 8:41 on a Tuesday morning, in the hallway outside courtroom 3 of the Kent County Family Court, holding her handbag with both hands the way you hold something that might get away from you. 6 years earlier, I had sat across a folding table from her in a small gray room and told her that 4 fragments recovered outside Ghazni were her son. She asked me if I was sure. I told her I was sure. That is the only kind of certainty anyone has ever paid me for. Now her name was on my husband's witness list. Through the glass I could see Grant. New tie. His mother beside him with her coat still on, indoors the way she always kept it on in my house. On the table in front of Grant's attorney lay a manila folder, and inside that folder was a DNA report saying that my 7-year-old daughter was not the child of my dead husband. That I had always known it. And that I had taken $400,000 from the United States government anyway. I had 11 minutes. There's a way you stand when you take a hit. Your back stays where it is. You don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Your heart rate is your business and nobody else's. So I didn't say anything. Down the hall, the ice machine cycled. It ran every 11 minutes. And it sounded exactly like a centrifuge spinning down, and I was the only person in that building who knew that. Delia Crane looked at the courtroom door. Then she looked back at me, and she said the second thing. It was not what anyone in that building was expecting. Least of all the man who had put her on the stand. To understand why a Gold Star mother was standing in that hallway on that particular Tuesday, you have to go back 8 years to a freezer in Delaware. And a 19-year-old kid who put 2 drops of blood on a card because a sergeant told him to. My name is Ray Callahan. I'm 36 years old. I work at Dover Air Force Base. When people ask what I do there, I tell them I work in a lab. That's true. It is also the smallest true thing I could have said, and I said it for years. To everybody, including the man I married. At Dover we do not say body. We say remains. We do not say found. We say recovered. Every case is 4 digits. A dash, 4 digits. The year, then the order it came to us in. There is a corridor there with a sign that says headlights on. It's for the transfers when a flag-draped case comes off a C-17 at 4 in the morning and the vehicles move in a line. Headlights burning in the dark. Because a man is going home and you do not drive dark for a man going home. I have turned my headlights on every single time I've gotten into a car for 13 years. Noon. July. Doesn't matter. My hand does it before I've decided anything. What I do is small and specific. A femur, a piece of jaw, a fragment the size of a fingernail. I extract what's left. I compare it against the reference specimen the service member gave the day he raised his right hand, 2 drops of blood. Dried on a card, and a swab, filed in a repository and kept for 50 years by an institution with no feelings about it at all. And when the comparison holds, I put a name back on a person. That's the whole job. That's it. There are maybe 30 of us in the country cleared to sign the final line. I have signed 411 names. Some of them I remember. Some of them I remember better than I remember my own husband's face, and I have never told anyone that, and I'm telling you now because I'm done deciding what is respectable to say out loud. Elias Vance enlisted at 19. He gave his blood card in 2008 at a processing station in Baltimore, in a room with a broken vending machine, because a sergeant with a clipboard told him where to sit. He married me in 2015. He deployed in 2017. He came home on mid-tour leave in August of that year for 2 weeks, and we didn't do anything with it. We went to a diner in Smyrna. We slept a lot. He fixed the latch on the screen door and I told him he'd done it wrong and he had. And he laughed and left it wrong on purpose, so I'd have to look at it while he was gone. On the 12th of November, Helmand Province, an IED took the lead vehicle. What came back to Dover was case 17-142. I was not permitted to touch it. There is a rule abhorring. bureaucratic, absolutely rigid rule that no examiner may work a case in which they have a personal interest. The word they use is recusal. It's 4 letters longer than it needs to be. So on the 9th of January, 2018, I stood in the corridor outside the sequencing suite with my hands at my sides and watched a colleague do my job on my husband through 2 centimeters of glass. I stood there for a while. He came out and said, "It's him." And I said, "Confirmed." Not "thank you." Not "are you certain?" I said "confirmed," because that's the word we use when a comparison holds, and it was the only word I could get my mouth around. 3 weeks after that, I found out I was pregnant. Here is a thing I have never said to a single person. For 8 years I have been afraid that the identification was wrong. Not because of anything. Not because of a discrepancy, or a doubt, or a whisper in a hallway. Nobody ever gave me a reason. I know exactly what the reports say, and I know what the standards are, because I wrote some of them. I was afraid because I have spent my life proving that people are wrong about who they are burying, and I could not stop the thought from coming. What if this time it's me? There was one way to check. My credentials never expired. Case 17-1142 sat in a server 400 meters from my desk, and any morning for 8 years I could have opened it. I never did. The postcards live in a cigar box on the top shelf of the hall closet, behind a shoebox of tax receipts, which is where you put a thing you do not want a guest to find and do not want to throw away. There are 11 of them. Family send them sometimes. Not often. Most people never learn there's a person on the other end of the phone call. They meet a casualty officer and a chaplain and a flag, and the lab stays a rumor. But sometimes somebody asks, and somebody tells them, and a postcard shows up at Dover addressed to the woman who did the testing, and the mailroom knows who that means. 11 in 11 years. I keep them face up. Picture side out. A lighthouse in Luz. The Grand Canyon. A dog wearing sunglasses. A church in Bristol, Tennessee, that somebody's mother must have driven past every day of her life. I have never turned a single one of them over. Grant Whitmore came into my life as paperwork. $400,000 arrives after a death like weather. Nobody warns you. It just lands in an account with your name on it, and it sits there being enormous. And the army hands you a folder and wishes you well. And you are 28 and pregnant, and you cannot make yourself open the folder. Someone at the family readiness group gave me a card. Financial advisor. Works with a lot of survivors. Grant had good handwriting and he never once said he was sorry for my loss, which at the time was the kindest thing anybody had done for me. He put $250,000 into a trust for the baby. He explained the tax structure twice, slowly, without condescension. He asked me if I wanted any special provisions. I said I wanted an independent accounting every 3 years. Somebody outside. Somebody who didn't know us. He laughed a little and said most people don't ask for that. I said, I like a record. He wrote it in. We were married in 2021. He was named trustee because he was the trustee already, and because Nell had been calling him Grant since she could talk, and it seemed like a lot of paper to change over a name. His mother is named Marguerite. She was a court clerk in Sussex County for 22 years, and she says the word docket the way other people say God. She folds paper napkins into thirds before she uses them. The first Thanksgiving, someone asked what I did. Grant said, Ray works in a lab out at Dover. And Marguerite said, how nice, dear. Clean work. Dover Air Force Base is 40 minutes from her kitchen table. It has been the point of entry for every American service member killed overseas since 1955. She has driven past the gate her entire adult life. She never asked. Neither did anyone else. And I let it stand, for 4 years, at every holiday, because correcting people sounds like bragging, and because I had decided a long time ago that silence was a form of respect. That was the mistake. It took me 8 years in a courtroom to see it, and I want to be honest with you, I still don't fully believe it. Some part of me still thinks I was right. In June, our garage roof developed a leak. Not a real one. A slow one. A drop every 11 or 12 seconds from a spot near the light fixture, into a paint can I put down and then forgot about. Nell was 7 that summer, and she'd figured out that if you lie on the concrete with your head on a folded towel, you can see the drop form and hang and let go. So we did that. Saturday afternoons, most of June and half of July. Flat on our backs on a cold garage floor counting. 209, she said. 210. You skipped one. I did not. You did. You were breathing. She thought that was hysterical. Then, out of the middle of nothing, do dead people get cold? The drop hung. Let go. No, I said. Okay, she said, and went back to counting. And I lay there on the concrete of a rented house in Camden, Delaware, and I could not have told you a single reason why my chest hurt. I did not fix the roof. I want to be clear about that. I never fixed it. There was a leak in that garage the entire time this story happens. On the 11th of August, an envelope came from Hartley and Voss, certified public accountants, addressed to Grant Whitmore, trustee. I brought the mail in because I got home first. Grant came into the kitchen still in his coat and took it out of my hand, not fast, not strange. Just took it and said, "That's the trust thing. The 3-year thing. You remember?" I said I remembered. He said the accounting was scheduled for October, and it was going to be a nuisance, and he'd need to pull statements. And did we want to order in? We ordered in. For the next 3 weeks he was up at 6 every morning to get the mail before the carrier had finished the block. He said he was walking more. He'd started walking, he said. For his back. I noticed it. I want to be extremely precise here, because it matters later. I noticed it. I filed it. And I did not think about it once. Sometime that spring, Grant started asking about Elias. Small things at first. What he'd been like. Whether he was funny. Whether Nell's stubbornness came from him, and whether that was genetic or whether kids just decide who to be. I hadn't talked about Elias in 4 years. Because talking about a dead husband in front of a living one seemed like a thing a cruel woman would do. So when Grant started asking, something in me came loose. I told him about the screen door latch. I told him about the diner in Smyrna. I told him the dates of his leave and what the weather had been. I told him about standing in the corridor, and the glass, and the word confirmed. I thought, he's finally letting me have this. He was building a timeline. He asked me questions for 6 months and I answered every one of them. Gratefully. And I have had a year now to sit with how that feels. And it does not get smaller. On the 3rd of September I walked out of the mortuary building at 5:20 in the afternoon, and there was a man standing next to my car, under the sign that says headlights on. He asked if I was Ray Callahan and I said yes, and he handed me a folder and apologized. Process servers apologize. Nobody tells you that. Emergency ex-party order, Kent County Family Court. Temporary sole custody to Grant Whitmore. Pending hearing. Signed by a judge I'd never met, on the strength of an affidavit I'd never seen. On a Tuesday when I was at work matching a fragment of scapula to a staff sergeant from Ohio. Ex parte means the other side wasn't there. Attached, a report on letterhead that said Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory, Dover AFD. Kinship analysis. Alleged father, Vance, Elias J.S. Child Vance Callahan, Nell R. Excluded. And an affidavit, sworn from Grant Whitmore, stating that his wife, an employee of that laboratory, had known since 2018 that the child was not the deceased's, had submitted survivor benefit claims regardless, and had used her position to ensure no one would ever check. I read it standing up in a parking lot. Then I got in my car and turned on my headlights and drove to the daycare, and Nell was already gone. She had been picked up at 3:40 by her stepfather, who was on the list, because I had put him on the list. I sat in the parking lot of the Camden-Yoming Early Learning Center for 1 hour and 40 minutes. I didn't call anyone. I don't remember deciding not to. At some point, a woman came out and knocked on my window and asked if I was all right, and I said, "Confirmed," which is not a thing you say to a stranger in a parking lot, and she backed away, and I don't blame her. 41 days. That's how long she was gone. Tobias Veteran was 55 years old, and he sighed before he spoke. Every time. Like each sentence cost him something up front. He read the file in his office in Dover with the window open. When he got to the report, he stopped. "This is real." "No." He looked up. "How do you know?" I told him. "The Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory identifies human remains. It does that, and it does nothing else. It does not perform kinship testing for private parties. It does not issue paternity or exclusion reports for civil matters. There is no request form. There is no fee schedule. There is no product number. A report from AFDIL telling a family court that a child is excluded as the offspring of a soldier is not a rare document. It is a document that cannot exist. I had known that in 4 seconds. Standing in a parking lot. Tobias put both hands flat on the desk. Then we say that. Tomorrow. We stand up and we say that. I said no. The hearing on the 9th was procedural. 20 minutes. Continuance granted. I sat on a bench in the hallway outside courtroom 3 afterward, and Marguerite Whitmore came and sat down next to me with her coat on, and neither of us said anything for a while. Then she said, "They've changed the carpet." I looked at the carpet. It was blue, she said. 22 years. It was blue. Down the hall, the ice machine started up. 11 minutes. A centrifuge spinning down. Marguerite folded her hands on her handbag. She said, "You know what I could never understand about you, Ray?" I waited. "You make a living inventing names for pieces of bone," she said. "And you look at my son like he's the one who's not real." I believed him, she said. That's what a mother does. She believes him. She stood up. She smoothed her coat, which had not moved. He's not a strong man. He never was. I know exactly what my son is. But he's mine, and you have never once, in 4 years, looked at him like he was in the room. Then she went into the courtroom, and I sat there and I did not defend myself. And I want you to understand that, at the time I thought that was strength. Tobias called that night. "Ray. Case 17-1142. Your credentials are active. Nobody has suspended you. You could pull that file tomorrow morning and put the actual identification report in front of a judge, and this ends by Friday." He was right about all of it. That's the part nobody understands. They never took my badge. For 41 days I could have walked 400 meters and opened a server and been holding the truth by 9:15. The Army's opened a 15-6 said. Because he filed a complaint. Do you know what that is? An investigation. An administrative investigation. An officer gets appointed. She reads everything. I switched the phone to the other ear. If I touch that file now, then for the rest of my life the record will show that Ray Callahan accessed her own husband's case in the middle of a fraud allegation. That's the sentence. That's what it'll say. Forever. I believe you, Ray. I don't need you to believe me. I need the record. Nobody would blame you. That's not what a record does. A record doesn't blame. It just says what happened. He was quiet. He needs me to reach for it, I said. That's the whole thing. That's the entire thing he's built. He needs me to reach. Tobias sighed. Then don't reach, he said, and he sounded like a man agreeing to something he thought was going to cost me my daughter. He was almost right. They gave me 1 hour on Thursdays at a supervised visitation center off Route 13 that smelled like carpet shampoo and had a wall clock stopped at 4:15. Nobody ever fixed it. 4 weeks. Every Thursday. 4:15. Nell would come in and put her forehead against my sternum and stand there. The rule was I couldn't discuss the case. So we discussed other things. On the second Thursday, she said, without any preamble at all, in the same voice she'd used for "Do dead people get cold?" "Grant burned Daddy's letter in the sink." I said, "Which letter?" "The one in the shoebox." He said it was mine now, and then he burned it in the sink and ran the water. The letter was dated 24 August 2017. Written on the 12th day of his leave, sitting at my kitchen table in the same house, and mailed anyway, because he thought it was funny to mail a letter to somebody sitting across from you. It said what he'd been doing that August. Where he'd been. Who he'd been with. The monitor watched us through a square of glass set into the door. "There is a form. She notes what you say." "Okay," I said. Nell looked up at me. "Okay. What do you want for your birthday?" On the 22nd. Grant's attorney entered Exhibit 14. Photographs. 11 postcards, arranged in a grid on my kitchen table, picture side up. Somebody had lined them up with a ruler. The lighthouse. The Grand Canyon. The dog with the sunglasses. The affidavit language was, "The respondent maintains an archive of communications from the families of deceased servicemen, which she has never answered, and which she keeps concealed in her home." The word they used, in open court, was fixation. Grant's attorney said, "Your Honor, we're not suggesting Chief Callahan is a bad person. We're suggesting she is not entirely present. She has a documented preoccupation with the dead. She keeps their mail." He said she keeps their mail the way you'd say she keeps their teeth. And I sat there with my hands in my lap. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. That's the thing I couldn't say out loud in a courtroom, and can barely say now. I did keep them. I did hide them. I never answered a single one. He had the shape of it exactly right. He just didn't know why. Tobias leaned over during the recess and asked me one more time, and it was the third time, and I said no for the third time, and he didn't ask again. The witness list came on the 29th of September. 4 names. A neighbor. Marguerite. A colleague from Grant's office. And Crane, Delia M. Milford, Delaware. He'd read the postmarks. That was all it took. He'd taken the 11 postcards off my closet shelf, and he'd read the postmarks, and he'd found the one who lived 40 minutes away, and he had subpoenaed a 71-year-old woman who runs a laundromat to come into a courtroom and say, under oath, that I had never written her back. "I'm here to testify against you," she said in the hallway. And then she said the second thing. "Whose idea was it?" Delia Crane asked. "To have me come all this way and tell everybody about a postcard nobody ever read the back of." Court came in at 9:04. Before anything else, the judge did a housekeeping thing. She asked Grant to affirm the petition he had filed. "Mr. Whitmore, the document at the center of this proceeding. Do you believe it to be genuine?" Grant stood. He said, "I believe it's genuine, Your Honor." Believe. Not it is. I have thought about that one word for a year now, and I have decided it may be the only careful thing he did in this entire business. Somebody coached him, or he coached himself. You cannot perjure yourself with a belief. Delia Crane took the stand at 9:20. She wore a cardigan. She held her handbag in her lap through the entire testimony, and no one asked her to put it down. Grant's attorney was good. He was careful and he was quick, and he asked exactly 3 questions. "Mrs. Crane, in 2019, did Chief Warrant Officer Callahan participate in the identification of your son?" "She did." After that identification, did she ever contact you? No. Did she ever respond, in any way, to any communication you sent her? No. He said nothing further, and he sat down, and he was pleased, and he had every right to be. He had gotten exactly what he came for. The judge said, "Mrs. Crane, you may step down." And Delia Crane didn't move. "Ma'am, you may step down. You didn't ask me what I wrote on the back." The courtroom was not silent. The courtroom was full of the sound of somebody's chair, and a bailiff shifting, and out in the hall, right on schedule, an ice machine. The judge said, "Mrs. Crane." For 11 days, Delia Crane said, nobody would tell me anything. Everyone was so kind. Everybody was so careful. They said we believe. They said we're fairly confident. There was a chaplain who held my hand for 40 minutes and never once used my son's name. She was looking at the middle distance, the way you look when you're reciting something. And then this woman sat down across a table from me in a gray room, and I asked her if she was sure, and she said, "I'm sure." She turned her hands over on the handbag. I wrote, "You were the only one who did not say you believed. You said you knew. Thank you for knowing." She looked up. I have wondered for 6 years why she never answered. I thought I'd done something improper, a small dry breath. I'm glad to hear it's because she never turned it over. That's a better reason than the one I had. Then she said, to nobody in particular, "I want to see the report he says she wrote." I have to tell you why. 11 postcards, 11 years, picture side up on a shelf behind a shoebox, and I never turned one over, not because I didn't care, and not because it hurt, though it did. Because one of them might say, "You got it wrong." Because if I opened them, I'd have to open all of them, and if I opened all of them, I'd have to open the one from myself. The one that's been sitting in a server 400 meters from my desk since January of 2018. The one that says whether the 4 fragments in that suite really were the man who fixed my screen door wrong on purpose. I built my entire adult life around giving certainty to strangers. I never once took any. And a woman who runs a laundromat in Milford, Delaware, a woman my husband's lawyer paid mileage to said it out loud in a courtroom, in front of a judge, in front of Marguerite, in front of Grant, without knowing she was doing it. I did not react. I want to be honest. It was not restraint. There was nothing left in my body to react with. Major Simone Okafor was sworn in at 11:05. She had sunflower seeds in her breast pocket, and she'd offered me one in the hallway, which is not a thing an investigating officer is supposed to do, and I had said no thank you. She was appointed under Army Regulation 15-6 to investigate allegations of records falsification made against me. By Grant Whitmore. In writing. On the 11th of September. "Major, what did your investigation consist of?" "Ma'am, I read everything." The judge said, "Could you be more specific?" "No, ma'am. I mean, I read everything. That's what a 15-6 is." She had 2 documents. The first was 6 pages from Staff Sergeant Elias Vance's personnel file. Not the identification file. His personnel file. The routine, unglamorous, quadruplicate paper trail of a man who was in the Army. "Ma'am, Allegation 2 states that Staff Sergeant Vance was continuously deployed from June 2017 until his death and could not have fathered the child." Yes. Staff Sergeant Vance was granted mid-tour leave from 14 August 2017 to 28 August 2017. Approved by his company commander. Countersigned by his Battalion S1. Flight manifest. Kuwait to Baltimore, 17 August. Return manifest, 27 August. Grant's attorney stood up. He said the word relevance and then he stopped, because he'd already understood, and he sat back down without finishing. He burned a letter in a kitchen sink and ran the water. He forgot Elias was a soldier. Soldiers don't leave letters. Soldiers leave paperwork. There is a form for going home and a form for coming back, and 4 people sign each one, and it goes in a file. And the file is kept by an institution that has never had a feeling about any of it, for as long as the man is dead and longer. The second document was a log. Every door at that facility reads a badge. Every badge is a number. The system does not care who you are. It writes down where you were, and it timestamps it, and it never stops. Ma'am, I pulled 14 months of access records for the sequencing suite. That's the room where case 17-1142 was worked. And Chief Warrant Officer Callahan's badge does not appear. Not once. Not in 14 months. She turned a page. I also pulled the corridor readers, because I wanted to know if she'd been in the building at all. She read from the log, flatly the way you read a coordinate. 9 January 2018. Badge 448 enters Corridor C at 712 hours. Badge 448 exits Corridor C at 923 hours. She looked up. There is no door out of Corridor C except back the way you came. Ma'am, she stood in a hallway for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Nobody said anything. Marguerite Whitmore turned her head and looked at a blank section of wall to her left, and she kept looking at it, and she did not stop looking at it for the rest of the morning. Then Major Okafor said the last thing, and she said it the way you'd read a supply figure. Ma'am, in the course of investigating an allegation of federal benefits fraud, the repository released Staff Sergeant Vance's reference specimen for comparison. There is exactly one door that opens that freezer. Those samples don't come out for grieving widows. They don't come out for family courts or curious relatives or a woman who has been afraid for 8 years. They come out to identify remains. And they come out when the federal government is investigating a felony. Grant had to allege a felony to make his story work. He unlocked it himself. He walked up to the one door in the United States that I could never open, and he opened it, and he held it, and he waved my dead husband through. The judge read the result out loud because that's what judges do. The specimen, 2 drops of blood on a card, given by a 19-year-old in a room with a broken vending machine in Baltimore in 2008, kept frozen for 17 years by people who never met him. Probability of paternity, 998%. Not excluded. Confirmed. Grant laughed. 1 syllable, up in his throat, the way you laugh at a joke you don't think is funny. It cut off in the middle. His right hand went out behind him and found the back of the chair without his head turning. He stood there holding it. His attorney capped his pen, then uncapped it. Then it went out of his hand, and over the edge of the table, and onto the carpet. It stayed there the rest of the morning. Nobody picked it up. Grant said, "Is it hot in here?" He asked the judge if he could use the restroom. He never came back into that room. His lawyer finished the morning alone, and did it well. And I have thought since that it was probably the worst hour of that man's professional life. I did not stand up. I did not speak. I had not spoken in that courtroom on that day, not once. I want to be very clear about what I did, because people ask. I sat. He was waiting by the elevators. He looked at the carpet and he said, "Are you going to tell her what I did?" Not did you win. Not I'm sorry. He wanted to know what would be in the record. I thought about 11 postcards, face up on a shelf. I thought about a laundromat in Milford. I thought about 2 drops of blood in a drawer. I said I don't invent names. Then I went and found my car, and the battery was dead, because I had left the headlights on. The 15-6 went where those things go. Grant's forgery of a federal laboratory's letterhead is its own offense. And the trust accounting happened in October, the way I'd written down that it would in 2018, in a lawyer's office, at a table, because I liked a record. $216,000 was not where it was supposed to be. He'd moved it 3 years ago to cover a client. He meant to put it back. He said that to the investigators, and I believe him. And it doesn't matter, and both of those things are true. He lost his license. He pled to 2 counts. He did 11 months. And here is the part that I know some of you are going to hate. He sees her. Supervised. Twice a month. He shows up. He's never late. My daughter calls him Grant and hugs him at the door, and I stand in the parking lot with my headlights on, and I let it happen. Because she is 7, and because what he did was to me. If you were waiting for the part where I destroy him, I don't have it. He destroyed himself in a courtroom in front of his mother, and I watched, and I felt almost nothing. And then I went and asked a stranger for a jump start. I want to tell you the record saved me. It's a good line. It's the kind of thing you say at the end of a story like this. The truth was in the system all along. Just be patient. Just be good. It isn't true. The record didn't save me. The record sat there. It sat there for 8 years. Silent, complete, indifferent. In a server and a freezer and a personnel file in 3 different buildings. It would have sat there for 50 more. Simone Okafor read it. A 39-year-old ordnance officer who failed the LSAT twice and eats sunflower seeds out of her breast pocket got handed a duty nobody wanted. And instead of reading the 2 pages the complainant highlighted for her, she pulled 14 months of door logs. That's not a system working. That's a person working. The system just refused to lie about it afterward. So if there's a thing I believe now, it's smaller and less comforting than what I believed before. The institution will remember. It will not come and find you. Somebody still has to walk down the hall and look. The other thing took me longer. For 8 years I thought silence was a form of respect. I learned it in a gray room. When you tell a mother her son is dead, you do not explain. You do not soften. You do not fill the air. You give her the truth in the fewest possible words, and then you let her have the silence, because it belongs to her and not to you. That is correct. That is the right way to do that job. It is not a way to be married. I still have the phone. 4 years of messages to that man. I went back and I read all of them. On my way. Running late. 20 minutes. Yes. Understood. Nell has a fever. 101. No. Confirmed. Not one of them is longer than 7 words. Not one of them is a question. In 4 years I never asked that man anything I didn't already know the answer to. I let his mother believe I worked somewhere clean. I let him believe I was a woman who kept a box of dead men's mail on a shelf. I never corrected either of them, and I called it dignity. I know that now. It hasn't made me behave any differently. I'm still that woman. I just know her name. He asked me about Elias for 6 months and I thought he was letting me in. He was building a timeline. I have to live with the fact that the happiest I'd been in years was the 6 months a man was assembling a case against me, and that the reason it made me happy was that he was finally asking. The greatest thing I did in that courtroom was nothing. 41 days, an active badge, 400 meters of hallway, and a file with my dead husband's name on it that would have ended the whole thing by Friday. I never reached for it. Not because I was strong. Because I understood the machine. He needed 1 fingerprint of mine on that door, and he was going to build a woman out of it. And the only way to prove I never touched a thing is to never touch it. I don't know if that was brave. It looks like nothing. It photographs like nothing. There is no version of it you can put on a thumbnail. The truth didn't need me to defend it. It needed me to leave it alone. Nell came home on a Tuesday. At 2 o'clock the next morning I got the cigar box down off the shelf and sat on the kitchen floor and turned them over. All 11, one at a time, like changing a dressing. 10 of them said some version of thank you. The 11th was from a father in Bristol, Tennessee. Church on the front. On the back, in ballpoint, pressed hard. I hope you sleep. I have read that sentence maybe 200 times. Some nights it's a blessing. Some nights it's the other thing. I have decided I am not entitled to know which, and that the man who wrote it probably didn't know either. Nell reads one a night now. Out loud at the kitchen table, badly stopping on the long words. There is no glass anywhere in that room. It took me a month to notice that. She's decided this is a job we do. She asked me who Marcus Crane was and I told her, and she asked what he was like, and I said I didn't know. And she said, "Then why do you remember him?" I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't. Delia Crane gave me the jump start, in the courthouse lot, with cables out of her trunk. Neither of us said anything about the morning. She let the car run for a while and then she said, "You want to shut those off," meaning the headlights. And I said no. And she said, "All right." And she drove home to Milford. There are 4 letters from Marguerite Whitmore in the drawer under the cigar box. They came in November, December, January, and one on Nell's birthday. I have not opened them. I know exactly what that makes me. I sat in a courtroom and had my life given back to me by a woman who could not understand why I never turned a postcard over. And I went home, and I put 4 unopened envelopes in a drawer, and I have left them there. I'm not going to pretend I've resolved that. It's the one wound in this whole business that hasn't closed, and I have stopped expecting it to. In March, Nell wrote a postcard. She found a rack of them at a gas station outside Smyrna and picked the one with a lighthouse on it, because she has decided the lighthouse is ours. She asked me what she was supposed to write. I said I didn't know. She wrote something. Then she turned it face down on the table and put her arm over it and would not show me. Milford is 40 minutes away. I put the stamp on it. I walked it out to the box at the end of the driveway and I put the flag up. I want to be accurate about what I did, because it isn't much. I put the stamp on. And the last thing. I know now that the identification in 2018 was correct. I have known since a Tuesday in October, when a judge in a family court read a number off a page and put my husband's name back on him for the second time. 8 years of not asking. And when the answer finally came, it came from a stranger's mouth, in a proceeding my second husband constructed to take my daughter, in a room where his mother was staring at a wall. I got the thing I wanted most in the world, and I can never take it out of the room where it was handed to me. I still have not fixed the roof in the garage. Some Saturdays we lie down on the concrete and count. Silence isn't dignity. From the outside they look identical. That is the entire problem with it. People believe. I confirm. For 8 years I thought those were 2 ways of doing the same thing. They are not. Believing is something you do for yourself. Confirming is something you do for somebody else. Nobody ever confirmed me. I never asked anybody to. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. I spent a whole career handing strangers a certainty I would not take for myself, and it cost me 41 days with my daughter to find out what that had made me. Have you ever let people believe a smaller version of you, because correcting them felt like bragging? Has anyone ever used the quietest, most private thing about you as the reason you couldn't be trusted? And is there someone in your life who would go pull 14 months of door logs, not because they had to, but because that's who they are? If a name came to you while I was talking, put it in the comments. Just type, "I remember them." If this one sat with you, a like helps somebody else find it. And if you want to hear the next one, subscribe and turn on notifications. Take care of yourself. Turn your headlights on. I'll see you in the next one.